All right. Hello and welcome. All of my controls have just disappeared, so that's a good start. Welcome to Pebble Beach's regular giving masterclass. We thank you all for joining us on your lunch hour. Hope you got your sandwiches ready. As I just mentioned, we've got quite a full program of stuff to share with you today. We're going to try to finish up around 1:50 just so we can have time for some questions. But at any point, please just stick those into the chat if you have them, and we'll try to get to them. If we can't get to them, then obviously you are welcome to get in touch with us at any time, and we can address those. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Amy. I'm the Client Services Director here at Pebble Beach. I will introduce everybody else in due course, but we've got some housekeeping to go through first. So just so that everybody can obviously take part and you can take away information, we are recording this webinar. We then put it up on our website. So it's a way that you can access it later on if you wanted to just go back and see something that may have happened or take a slide from there or whatever you need to do. So just so everyone's aware of that. And obviously, if you ask a question, it may show up in that recording. I also just wanted to point out, so the next webinar that we're doing is last Christmas, obviously, looking at our Christmas campaigns from last year. And we've got a really good panel who are coming along to talk about their campaigns. So we've got Ruth from Christian Aid, we've got Joe from Devon Air Ambulance, and we've got Hazel from Scottish Association for Mental Health. So please do come along. There's tickets there. So if you want to go ahead and grab that on the screen, I will also send that out when we've actually done the webinar and we've got it up on the website. So don't worry if you don't get it right now. You will have access to it at another point. But we'd love to see you there. Who doesn't like to talk about Christmas in June? Nobody. Everybody. Everyone. It's what we like to do. All right. So without further ado, I shall introduce our panel. So everybody here is from Pebble Beach, and everybody here has their own sort of, I guess, expertise in terms of regular giving. So you've got me, I'm the Client Services Director. You may have met me before. We've got Ellie, who's got a vast history in hospices and charities, and she is our Client Partnerships Director. We've got Chelsea, who we call our data guru, and she will be going through some of the data processes that we like to look at with regular giving. And then we've got our creative director.
Be happy to look at some things.
If you are coming in, if you could please mute yourself, or I might do it manually. Please don't think I'm rude if I do that. But these guys are going to just share their thoughts and expertise about how we create campaigns, little bits of information that might be useful to you wherever you happen to be in your regular giving journey. So here are the objectives. We are going to go through all the stuff that you could possibly think of to start maybe your regular giving program at your charity, or to bolster it, or to make it better, or to just, I don't know, have a look at some of the things that maybe you could incorporate into what is already a fantastic program. But also we look at this, I suppose, from the donor's perspective, how we can make sure that they feel loved and included and engaged with whatever it is that you happen to be doing. And so the order of that effectively is strategies and plans. Then we're going to go over campaigns and materials, so what stuff you can create. And then finally, we're going to look a little bit at welcome and stewardship, and how we get those donors, I guess, loving everything that you do and wanting to give a regular gift. So I'm going to pass over to Ellie, who's going to talk about sort of the first stages of this process. So if you were going to start from scratch, regular giving, this is your first endeavor, we would look at how, I suppose, those things are an audit effectively of what's going on. But I'll let Ellie talk about this because she's very much the expert in this area. Over to you, Ellie.
Thank you so much. So first thing to emphasize, this is all about sustainability. And this is very much about creating that lovely baseline of support for your organization that you can build other types of fundraising on. But we know regular giving, super duper important, especially now. I'm so delighted that so many of you are here. So these are really just the first couple of slides. I'm going to touch on a couple of things that we would find that come up time and time again when it comes to delivering one of our super duper regular giving audits. And I just want to be clear, whenever we are privileged enough to come in and deliver this kind of work, it's very much about focusing on you as an individual organization. And that, I think, I would emphasize for everybody to take away. is this is about you. It's about your organization's potential. It's about developing a model that's applicable and suitable and relevant for you. And it's also about maximizing your opportunities. As well as the really lovely visible stuff, I am such a pain when it comes to the sort of structure or infrastructure around that and the processes that have to happen to make RG possible and thrive. So essentially, what we do is go in and have a look at what's performing really well, but also look at some of the gaps. And quite often it might be gaps in knowledge or it's gaps in structure. So as I say, this is about learnings that come up time and time again. Next slide. Awesome. So key considerations, and I'm not going to labor all of these, but just to emphasize, there's so much more to think about sometimes when it comes to regular giving, much more than just, get a nice campaign out there and engage with people. So first things first is thinking about your audience. We would always emphasize that you do some really careful research and some sensible, robust data analysis. Now, there's different ways of doing this. Again, we have a super duper tool that Chelsea is going to take you through in detail. And she is going to essentially go through a model that you could emulate. Can I ask whoever that is to mute, please? Sorry. Thank you. As I say, so that's something you could emulate, but we would say very much as a starting point, we would, that is the first most important thing to think about is your audience. Who are you going to talk to? Second thing is to think about proposition. So this obviously aligns with, the area of need that you're working in and with the supporter interest. So we would always emphasize that it's worth thinking about regular giving proposition differently, obviously to your cash, to your legacy propositions. There probably needs to be some strengthening on the why element of why your supporters should give in this way. And we would emphasize the sort of tangibility side of this too, so that you are really protecting that lovely line of unrestricted giving. But again, I have an amazing colleague, Jude, who's going to come in and tell you all about proposition in much more detail. As I say, I wanted to touch on the sort of systems and processes element of it. So I think there's a couple of things. If I was starting out from scratch when it comes to regular giving, I feel like there's some basics that people quite often overlook. Are you doing the very best you can when it comes to every supporter touch point to maximize sort of data collection and obviously associated income? So as well as things like phone, email, are you getting the contact preferences in a way that's sensible and compliant? But things like even just making sure you're getting those first names and initials, your home addresses, just to uplift the gift aid income while you're there. Are you doing that at the point of potentially recruiting? But again, is everybody doing that across the organization as they should? So going right back to scratch with some of our audit work, that's what we'll look at. We'll drill down to those touch points. What are you doing? Are you getting that information you need? And then another element is the sort of process mapping side of things. I tend to talk to different teams, and invariably we go back and we look at supporter care to see how, what's happening. Are you definitely being 100% compliant? Because that's a biggie. But also what can be done to maximize supporter care. And again, I would say it may seem obvious, but it's generally worth going back and reviewing what systems and processes you have in place to give you that sort of really nice, clear process map with every stage detailed. Again, from a compliance point of view, but also from a reconciliation point of view, and also bringing everybody else in the organization with you. Supporter care and stewardship, I'm going to talk more about later on in the session. It's so important. But the last one as well, in terms of this slide, thinking about reporting, I often find that regular giving it can be problematic. It seems to stay with like a really small cohort of people, often within the organizations we deal with. And then it's impossible to ask the whole team to get on board whenever they don't have access to the required info. So please don't think about investing in sort of any significant regular giving activity until you've got that effective reporting established, it's in place, it's embedded, and you're sort of, it's automated ideally. So yeah, that's the sort of the key elements of the audit. If we could move on to the next slide. So once you've got your audit findings and you're happy, you know what direction of travel you're going in, we can start thinking about your model plan. So again, if we skip on to the next slide. So really, it's worth, again, spending time assessing all your previous regular giving promotional activity, thinking about the channels that you've maybe used or thinking about using. And again, I'll touch on the likes of face-to-face, phone, and all of that. But invariably, I will always get to a point within the sort of process, and where I've been within other charities before, it's very much about introducing like a structured plan, a very sort of sensible, I would say, risk-averse plan. But you're essentially, there's different component parts, and they never stray from this. So the first is obviously looking at development. So that's looking at your existing supporters, seeing what opportunities are presented there. Looking at recruitment, quite often that will be, it's really like a sort of looking at testing different elements and sort of building then on a recruitment test plan. The other element to think about as well is cash and RG. I think so often we will be dealing with clients who almost treat cash and RG separately, and they very much go together. So for me, cash activity has to be included in every successful RG program. You know, you need that sort of, quite often your activity depends on a two-stage approach where you're asking cash responders to convert to a more committed type. And then sometimes with your regular given activity, you're gonna generate cash, so vice versa, track both at the same time. And then the other consideration to make is that sort of balance between asking and thanking as well. So while I often think about it in my head as a simple matrix, I appreciate it's not necessarily always so simple. But again, it's about getting that sort of solid mix of channels that's going to work for you and the culture of your organization. So another consideration I would emphasize is getting that balance between in-house and external. You possibly with regular giving, you will need to think about going external. So I would very much endorse thinking about that. You know, unless you have the resource in-house, which is incredible and fair play to you, but so often we find that's not the case. Start sooner rather than later when approaching some suppliers, especially for particular activity. So if you're thinking about doing something face-to-face, like venue or door-to-door or street, it so often depends on availability with the agency and also volume. And the other thing I would very much recommend is definitely get references and think about your clawback. There's generally sort of a clawback clause in there. So think about that as well. That's a really key part of doing any kind of face-to-face activity. When it comes to things like phone, I would say the good suppliers tend to have survived the sort of the olive cook and COVID and so on. The sort of poorer ones have dropped away. But again, of course,
good.
And then direct mail, again, I'm going to be purely selfish here. We've got extensive experience in this area. Delighted to help if anybody wants to find out more. But the key thing is you might not be able to afford all of those different channels. It's worth scoping out your plan, making that assessment, looking at the likely return on investment. And I suppose if you can't afford those activities right now, you know, you can put them in your future plans and gives you that stretch for the future once you've done some testing and rolling out. To touch on a few of the sort of, I suppose the key things with some of these, like phone activity, for example, it can be really good in terms of you can deliver it in-house. You know, I think if staff or volunteers are trained effectively and supported effectively, and you've got scripts and you've got a little bit of objection handling in place, you know, that can be extremely effective. Again, another thing to think about is the sort of data management side of things. So what data you're going to capture and how you can roll that through and back onto the supporter database in an effective way. Using an agency, you're going to have that increased cost, but you can probably condense the length of campaign and the processes will be more efficient. And obviously callers have been trained professionally and so on. And don't forget all your sort of opportunities to maximize here. So it's thinking about things like gift data, making sure you're capturing gift aid information and use what data you have. So if, you know, if you've got that information of what people have given before, build on that. I'd also say call listening, bring some of that in. It's really super useful when it comes to looking at quality and ramping that up, and also addressing any queries as quickly as possible. The phone campaigns are great. They afford really great flexibility. You know, really easy to stop and start and so on. But they do require resource and support and management. As I say, face-to-face, we sort of touched on very quickly. It can often be the most successful in terms of sort of ramping up regular giving volumes. Again, there's considerations to be made, maybe geographically where you are. Northern Ireland's not an option. Door to door, some organisations won't touch it from a cultural, their internal culture perspective. Sorry, I should say. Venue, I find, is quite a nice sort of middle ground, but often it's quite competitive in order to find the venues where you can get those stands and get people out there and have that presence. But again, all things to consider, put it in the plan, evaluate, discount, and so on. And digital and email, all of those are really, they can be incredibly cost effective. And obviously, I think whenever we are sort of undertaking any campaign activity, it's always about integrating. So maximizing the spend you have in one area through potentially uplifting through digital activity, for example. So I think if we skip, could we go back 1 wee second? Yeah, so I'm not going to go through any of these activities in depth, though you will be super familiar with some of it. It's just to emphasize there's different options and different approaches with each of these sort of activities and channels. And what I'd strongly endorse is when it comes to the development aspect of your regular giving plan, is you get a good spread and a good mix of these. Don't be relying on one channel, and don't be relying on one, I suppose, type of ask, shall we say. But these things should be considered front and center as part of a really effective regular giving program, retaining existing supporters. If we go to the recruitment slide, that would be fab. Again, this is all about mix of channels. I think for me, I'll probably focus on this a little bit more, just because I suppose this is the area we get asked about a little bit more in terms of going out and recruiting new regular givers. So when it comes to the likes of the website and doing online activity, I think the biggest sort of bugbear I have is that sometimes that platform is not does not support regular giving in the way that it could. So again, something to think about. If you're here, you've obviously got a massive interest. Away you go and have a look at your website and give some thought as to how it is supporting RG. You need to check things like, I'd always say, like, functionality needs to be tested quite regularly as well. That can get missed quite often, and then people start wondering why they're not getting their regular givers coming through, but it's simply because there's some kind of glitch. Again, please prioritize it on the website. Quite often it gets lost somewhere else, or you'll get the same ask levels that are associated with cash giving, which is just not great. Yeah, you can get some really quick wins by looking online and thinking about digital. When it comes to things like door drop, so door drop, we would always say, this is the other really key thing with regular giving, is quite often you might need like a two-step approach. So it's not going to be just a case of going out and recruiting away. It's about going out, recruiting cash supporters, and then converting them, whether through phone or mail or what have you. But I think we've seen some really great success, and certainly in my sort of charity experience, looking at doing a really targeted door drop can be fantastic when it comes then to go on and do the sort of conversion element. Media appeal, I've chucked in there. Again, I've seen success with it as a regular giving product and cash, but it can be really economical if you have a super duper relationship with, I don't know, local press. For me, it was working with the likes of the Scotsman, the Herald, Belfast Telegraph, that kind of thing, where as long as you've got that really compelling bank of case studies and you can capture the sort of imagination of the editor, whoever, you can do some really nice regular giving recruitment or cash recruitment through that. And again, conversion if needs be. I would just emphasize there, make sure fundraising have a lead on that rather than potentially comms. No disrespect to comms, but I just think in terms of making sure the technical aspects are fulfilled when it comes to recruiting regular giving, it's worth having that connection as well.
Wendy, it's Andrea McIntyre here from Scotland.
Okay, I'm so nearly there. And then when it comes to face-to-face, it's just to emphasize, it's not just going to be about the face-to-face in terms of investment. It can be quite expensive, but you also need to think about things like the sort of stewardship aspect that goes around that. So once you've got those people back on board, your welcomes, your engagement, and so on. It's very much worth thinking about that as a sort of overarching element of the programme. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ellie. Super helpful as always. So what I'm going to be talking to you about is how you can develop a creative proposition that's really going to help you cut through the noise. And there's a lot of noise out there at the moment, and get people to sign up to your regular giving program. Thanks, Amy. Okay, so first things first, as we all know, is going to be about identifying your need and making it really clear and tangible. So this can be trickier than you think, because most charities have quite a lot of need at the moment. But to help you focus a little bit more, let's just imagine that you were to get an extra £20,000 a month from regular giving. Have a think about what would that money be spent on. So what's the first thing you would do or change if you had that money coming in on a regular basis? Make it as clear as you possibly can so that it's very black and white for the donor. And this really helps to build that really important trust and transparency between you and your supporter. Remember, supporters are less likely to give if they think that what they're donating is not really going to make an impact. So as clear as you can make it about how that money is going to make a difference is really going to help them. So in terms of communication, this is where we get into a little bit of the neuroscience. What we're trying to do is create a creative proposition that's going to activate the empathy circuitry in your donor's brain. So what we want to do with our words and our images and our video, if that's what you're going to be using as well, is to move people out of complacency and stasis and into empathy and action, so that they will actually feel sufficiently moved to actually sit down, fill out your response device, or go online to sign up. So bear in mind that some donors are going to be very visual. Some are going to respond really well to storytelling and to words. And then most will respond even better to a combination of the two. So the idea or the theme of your proposition, what you're looking for, is something that's really emotive, it's human-centered, and it takes your donor right to the heart of your need. So a really good litmus test that we can apply in fundraising. In marketing, when we're coming up with a creative proposition, a really good way of testing whether it's powerful and clear is to say, so what, at the end of it. So you've made your statement about your product or service. If you can answer the question, so what, or why should I care, in a really powerful way, then you know you're onto something. And then in fundraising, we can apply the why is this important test to really get to the heart of it. So every time you come up with something that you think is going to be really powerful, ask yourselves why this is important, and that will help you drill down. So in terms of your call to action, very much depends on the channel, but regular giving isn't going to be huge amounts comparison to, say, a legacy. So you're looking at amounts between, say, £3 and £25 a month. So it's really, really important that your supporters are reassured that this is actually going to make a difference. So they need to know that every single drop in the ocean matters, and is going to be important to your organisation. Thanks, Amy. So drilling down into your proposition, this is just a really simple formula that we've come up with that can help you get to your proposition. So very simply, what do we need? What is the big need in the organisation at the moment? What would it mean to us if we had that need met? And then why is this important? And I think this is the key one, because that takes you out from a very factual, informational proposition into something that's a lot more powerful and emotive. So if we could go to the next slide. So this is just an example of how to get to a proposition. So we work with a lot of hospice clients, so we've used hospices as an example. So the first question, what do we need? We need regular money coming in so that we can comfortably pay for more care staff. What is that going to mean if we can do that? It's going to mean that more staff means we can take care of more people. Now, why is it important that we reach more people? Because nobody should have to go through this journey alone. And that is what is taking you right down into the heart of the ask and creating something really powerful that people can relate to. So whether or not you've lost a loved one or you've had somebody experience hospice care, we can all connect to the idea of people going through this journey alone without the support that they need. And that's going to move us and create that shift in brain chemistry and move us into action. Thanks, Amy. So very, very simple creative execution of this. We've got to our proposition. Our headline is, no one should have to go through this journey alone. if you can give us £10 a month to help us fund more nurses, we'll make sure that they don't. So we've got our image, we've got a very clear, powerful, emotive proposition, and then a very clear, powerful ask. If I give £10 a month, it's going to make sure that as few people as possible go through this journey of living with a life-limiting illness on their own. So how do we get to the proposition? So this is the really fun bit from our perspective anyway. Conversations are so important. So I would say talk to as many people as you possibly can. Get as many different perspectives as you can. So talk to your staff, to your service users, to your supporters, other people who give on a regular basis, and really try and discover what's really important to them. And that is something that we can help you facilitate through our focus groups. So if that's something that's on your agenda, you can talk to us about that later. We'd always recommend recording the conversations so that you can be really present with the people that you're talking to and then go back to the conversation later. What you're looking out for are things that people say, snippets, anything that jumps out at you that feels really simple, but really compelling and truthful. The conversations don't have to be long. Very often we'll have a conversation with somebody and it's literally the last thing that they say that really strikes a chord. So you're looking for human truths that feel really truthful, whether or not the person that you're talking to or that you're going to be asking has a direct connection to your organization. So it's something that we can all relate to because it moves us. And I think this is really especially important for cold recruitment. So you're looking out for things that really resonate and really strike a chord. The next thing you're going to do is dump all your things, dump all your ideas and everything that's come up into a notebook or some post-it notes, or you can use mind mapping software, and then start to filter out the things that aren't quite hitting the spot for you. And something I would say that's really important at the moment is to keep your messaging super clear over clever. So bandwidth is really low collectively right now. I think we're all quite tired, we're quite worn out. There's so much noise coming at us from all directions. So keep it really clear. It doesn't have to be clever, but just make sure that you're not making your supporter work too hard to understand what it is they're being asked for and why you're asking it. Thanks, Amy. So I would say this because I'm the creative director, but I think investing in your creative is so important, and gathering together a really solid bank of materials that you can then use across all of your communications, or you can give to the agency that you're going to be working with. So as I've mentioned, bandwidth is low. There are so many brands and businesses and other charities out there really clamoring for your attention. So it's really important that your creative cuts through all that clutter. If you get it right, if you get the winning shot right, it's going to do so much of the heavy lifting for you. And it's going to create that shift in brain chemistry that we were talking about to really put your supporter in the right frame of mind to consider your ask. When you're looking for a photographer, I would say do your research. If you've come across a suite of photography with another charity that you think it looks amazing, get a recommendation. If you don't have recommendations, I would say work with a photographer who has a real eye for capturing a moment and for capturing a candid moment with people. So very often wedding photographers are quite good at that. Photographers that photograph events. Very often photographers that do families with children and small children are very good at capturing a moment really quickly in the moment. You are looking to make that connection with people. So in your photography, we're looking for eyes, connecting with eyes, open faces, quite natural and candid poses. And this is the same for whether you're working with humans or with animals. And then I would say if you get that winning shot, and you're going to combine it then with words that speak really powerfully to your proposition, I would say you've done at least 75% of the work. And then the work of your body copy is to really drill down further and get people over the line and get them signing up. Thanks, Amy. So just an example of what we've just been talking about. So eyes connecting directly to the camera, capturing candid moments. You can have some posed photographs. We've got this lovely nurse here in the middle on the left. But again, it's capturing the humanity and the energy of that person. And again, it can be with animals, it can be with humans. If you don't have the direct eyes to camera, you're still capturing that moment between people. And all of these images would do such a brilliant job combined with some powerful words and copy. Thanks, Amy. So once you've made the investment in your creative, literally use it everywhere. So it's not just about using it in your DM pack. Use it all across your website, your emails, your take ones, particularly your social media. And remember, the job of your photography and your creative is to invite people into your world. So you want to give people a sense of what you do, who you do it for, why it really matters that somebody is giving you their £5 a month rather. And it's about demonstrating the need, but also the fact that their donation really is going to make a difference to the people or the animals you support. And so finally, I would just say, if you are thinking about drilling down into that proposition, give Ellie a call later, because we have a proposition development offering, and this is something that we can help you with. But hopefully there's some really useful stuff there that you can take away and run with from today.
Now for something completely different, Chelsea.
Not completely different. You can be quite creative with data. I think it's getting a bit of a bad rap on this call so far. What I'm not going to do though is spend a long time going through this. If you want to book a call with us and chat all things data, please do, because I'd love to spend an hour or two chatting through regular giving data. What I'm going to do though, Amy, if we go on to the next slide, is just give you an overview of how we approach data. So everything that we've gone through so far is how we would approach working with you on a regular giving audit, and then moving into a communication to your warm audience and potentially a cold audience. Data is a massive part of this. The key thing that I think that we say to all the people that approach us is setting expectations for a regular giving communication is not like setting expectations for a one-off cash gift ask. It has to be a lower response rate, because you're going to get people who are promising you something over a longer amount of time. You're not going to see this huge cash injection in month 1, month 2. It's going to be a longer term thing that you're relying on your really committed special donors for. Don't let your channels work in silo from each other. Make sure your teams are talking to each other, and make sure that your website and your DM and your email and your phone are all connected. Look at your most committed donors is going to be key for this when it comes to a warm ask. So not just those people that are giving you huge gifts and then you've got a great relationship with them through your major donor team. You're going to be looking at people who give you small and often. They're going to be looking at people who give you all different types of gifts. So they've done an event for you, they've done an in-memory gift, they've done a community event. They're people that are showing that they're committed to you, but you just don't know who they are. You don't just want to blanket approach everyone and hope for the best, because you're not going to get the response rate that you need. If you're doing a DM appeal, your mail file should typically be smaller than if you're doing a cash ask. Cash ask gives you a chance to pop up once, really put your need out. They'll respond in a way that feels good to them. Regular giving, you've got to be so segmented and clever and really recognize that you have a relationship with these people. So reference that when you're talking to them. Explain that you know their history, what they've given, how they've given, and that you really, really value them. Create a top list of those that you'll spend more time on for follow-up. So in that mail file that you've created, segment the top ones and say these people are really special to us and we think we're going to get a really good response from them. If they don't respond to the DM appeal, if you've got an email for them, email them. If you've got a phone number, phone them. But just make sure that that relationship is friendly, it's professional, and again, you're referencing that you know how special they are to you and to your organisation, and what more that you could do if they gave you a committed gift. The best indicator of success for any regular giving is going to come from your existing data understanding. Don't just look at how one charity is doing it and think that that's going to work for you. And that's the same for price points. Don't set your price points in line with what somebody else is doing, because their regular giving activity and resource is so different to what you have in place already. You have to look at you and work out what's going to be most impactful and also give you a sustainable income stream. Thank you. So this is our IDA. For anyone who's worked with us before, you will recognise this. This is a recent one that we've done with an adult hospice. I'm not going to talk through this now because this could take hours and I think we all want to finish lunch and go back to work. But if you do want to talk through this brightly coloured table, please get in touch. I would love to talk data. So top to bottom basically is propensity to give, left to right is type of relationship and how likely they are to give to a certain thing. So we have this unique regular giving model. We have it for adult hospices, we have it for children's hospices, and we also have it for charities. So if you look at the left and the blues, those are people who are most likely to respond, and all the way in the right in the red, people who are least likely to respond. What you really want to do is drill down into your data. So if you looked at this now, you could just say, we'll blanket everyone, but you're not going to get the response from your red eventers as you would your green regular givers. And there's no point you putting a time and resource of a team that's probably already really stretched trying to get income in for something that you're not going to see an immediate cash flow from. What we have at the bottom is the averages from adult hospices, so we can compare the two. And like I said, we have this for children's and we have this for charities as well. If you look at this one particular model at the top, you can see that they have 33% of their database as a red eventer. That says to me that this hospice relies a lot on people taking part and doing things for them rather than then committing into a gift. If you appear to the right in this, you cannot have done anything to the left. So this hospice says to me, they've probably got a lot of people who've done a one-off event for them and then they've not committed to a gift in any other way since then. So this hospice might struggle trying to get people into their regular giving, which is why we have to really drill down into those donors in the top side of this. Yeah, that's my 2 slides done, I think.
You've got another one coming up, Charles. So yeah, everyone be aware, it's going to happen. Okay, so I am conscious that we've gone over a lot of what I guess we could term as homework. So we have basically said, you got to set up your plan, you got to take stock of what you've got in store for your charity, where you sit within, I suppose, that matrix of activity, materials, what kinds of regular givers you have, whether you have any at all, or whether you're trying to think about starting a regular giving sort of process. We've talked about proposition. We've talked about looking at the data that you have. And once you've done all of that homework, and some of it, maybe a bit sexier than other homework, you can start to look at whether or not a campaign is a thing that you could do. So we've done that. Let's just assume that we've made that decision and we want to go ahead and look at how we can make a campaign for our charity. So these are some of the things, this is not an exhaustive list. So this is some of the stuff that we would always want to make sure that we include in a warm appeal. And by warm appeal, we mean going out to existing people that have supported you in the past, whether it's online, whether it's in direct mail capacity, however they've done it, they have given you a gift of cash or something in the past. So for us, the warm appeal must-haves that we would look at first and foremost, and I know that this sounds a bit boring, but is making sure that you've got buy-in from the board and from the people who, I guess, make the bigger decisions about what the realistic goals for a campaign are. So I did see within the questions already, what would we expect to be a response rate? And the answer is going to be very different depending on what kind of charity you are. So if we were looking at hospices, we'd expect what we would term maybe like quite a decent response rate, but it might be something like a little bit below 1%. So being really realistic about what you're going to get out of this activity is paramount, because you want to bring the rest of the people along with you. But it's not just about this one campaign. It's about how you steward those people through your database, how they might become legacy prospects, how valuable, I suppose, if we're being really cynical, they might be to you over time. So it's not just a one and done activity. It's about starting and building a process by which you can recruit people into your family effectively. Chelsea mentioned the personalization of price points. So when we go out with a warm appeal, we more often than not will do something what we call an upgrade in conversion. So we're not just going to talk to people we want to start a regular gift. We're going to talk to current regular givers about the price that they're currently giving and see if there's a sensitive way that we can ask them to maybe increase that by £1 or £2. So that might be something that you think about, and it might be a really valuable way to say, hey, we're here. We love you. You're really fantastic. If you had a few more pounds a month, here's what you could do with that. So that's the upgrade mechanism. The response mechanism is really important. So those are just fancy ways of saying, how is your form? That form needs to be signed off by your bank in most cases. So make sure that that sort of compliance, Ellie kind of touched lightly on compliance, but these are really important parts to any kind of campaign. And then after that, we'll touch briefly on thanking and welcoming, because ultimately it's not just you saying, give us some money. You've got to actually welcome people into that family that you've created. Make sure that they understand how valuable they are to you, over the other way around. We also always create what's called the take one leaflet. So the sort of mini case for support that you'd be creating along with this appeal to enable your other fundraisers in other or other marketeers in other capacities to go out to the community and say, here's who we are, here's what we need, and here's how regular gifts actually help us to accomplish things within this charity. Ultimately, you need to understand what your goal is. So setting modest goals, I think, is quite important. And then you can smash them. So that's one way to look at it. But being really realistic about what you hope this activity to accomplish. So we've got a campaign here from Loros, which we did last year. So Loros, Leicestershire Hospice. I can't say Leicestershire because I'm from another country, and I apologize for my murdering that word. But you can see here sort of aspects of that sort of mini case for support that will be used. We used in this instance a clinician to, I guess, make the ask in terms of regular giving. This is Dr. Luke, and he sort of sets out the case for why it's so important for the hospice to have this regular income coming in every month. And it's a bit like what Jude touched on earlier. It's about, you know, making sure that they can be there for more people, making sure that they have access, you know, to the home support that they might need or the well-being support that they might need. And all of that is detailed within this leaflet here. There are some cold media implications to this. Now, again, we go back to the question, what is your goal? So you can do lots of fancy stuff if you want to, and if your budget allows. And when you do that fancy stuff, it's really, really important to think about how much you want to spend on that, because the return on the fancy stuff, and I'm being a bit mean by saying it's fancy because it is just, you know, stuff that's important to think about doing. You're not necessarily going to get that response rate that you would think. So these are some of the examples of fancy stuff, and I'm actually going to hand over to Chelsea to talk, I think, about door drop, which is one of the other things we tend to do.
I'm back. I'm going to speak at 3 times the speed again. We've got 2 columns here, and this is a lot of text. I'm not going to read through them, but on the left is some tips around door drops, and some right is some tips around social. So when I talked about data, that was mainly to do with warm audiences. This is looking at your data warm that can affect your cold targeting as well. So door drops, don't just pick houses on roads that you think are expensive. It's not always the way to go. Just because somebody has a big house doesn't mean that they have lots of money to give you, nor does it mean that they're going to give it to you. Something that we'd always do when it comes to a door drop is our bespoke kind of door drop analysis model, where we overlay your warm audience with your postcodes. If you're a national charity, it's a little bit more difficult, but it still gives you a bit of an idea of your kind of hotspots in the country or countries. It gives you an idea of where your supporters are, or people that look like your supporters. So we have that element. We also then overlay it with an index from Royal Mail, which gives you a kind of view of give to charity or look like your supporters again live. All of those sums together end up with a score, and then you can pick the postcode. You can be really selective about this, because again, it's not going to be something that you get a huge response from. So don't spend just loads and loads of money blanketing the whole area without doing testing first and seeing if this kind of thing you get responses from a cold audience. So social media wise, again, looking at your warm audience is going to tell you about your cold audience. So if you're going to do Facebook ads, great, but do some tests first. Test your creative, test your photos, your headlines, your copy, see what works with an audience with a smaller budget. Once you work out that, you can then put the larger budget behind a bigger campaign, and you already know what kind of resonates with people already. We've done this with loads of charities, and the results have always really, really surprised us. I think I'm done. Thanks, Amy.
I can't remember if this is me again, but we will go with it. So the other aspect to this, and I've sort of mentioned family several times now, is not just about asking people for money and then sending them sort of a standard, thank you for your donation of X amount of money. This is really about making sure that people feel part of a club that they don't want to leave. And so this is about retaining and making sure that those people feel valued once you've actually got them to sign up to the sort of holy grail of giving, which is regular giving. We want them to understand their personal impact. So again, that's all about messaging and making sure that they get how, you know, as Jude said before, their drop in the ocean actually affects that ocean. And also it is an opportunity for you to ask them how they'd like to be talked to going forward into the future. So just to give an example of that, so we're working with East Anglian Air Ambulance. on their appeal currently. But before that, which is maybe sort of reverse order, we did their welcome pack because they already have regular givers that they can give this welcome pack to. So for them, the messaging is about welcome to the crew. They are part of the family now. And these sort of beautiful images, as you can see, this is, I suppose, Jude, what you were talking about when you're talking about the sort of, you know, engagement with things, but who doesn't like a helicopter, right? It's also important to mention that before we did this activity, we did that sort of taking stock activity, that audit of who have you got, what are your resources like, how can we make sure that regular giving is sort of hit from all angles in terms of what they're capable of doing at East Anglian Air Ambulance. So that activity has now led to an appeal. So now we can kind of see how all of those pieces fit together, and they've already got their welcome pack ready to go. I'm going to pass this one to Ellie, I think.
Awesome.
Briefly.
And it's worth saying that with EAA, we did the audit as well first before we did the other elements too. So yes, this is just, I think, I guess, gosh, I sound like such a whinge, but it's another sort of thing that always falls out of any kind of audit work or any kind of regular giving program that we've been involved in. With any kind of push, I would say, for regular giving, and also some, you know, recruitment and development activity, both, but you are going to generate feedback and you're going to generate complaints. Anyone who says otherwise is just simply delusional. It's just fact. So I wanted to emphasize here that it's worth making sure, you know, being mindful that this is going to put a demand on resource, and that you need those relevant systems and processes in place so that the team themselves, whether it's your supported care team or fundraisers, are in the best place possible to respond as effectively as they need to do. So it's just to give to some consideration to, because I've seen it happen before where complaints sort of maybe escalate in volume, and then it starts sort of filtering through that, my goodness, the campaigns or the activity's not working and we need to reassess the program. But if you can preempt all of this, you know, and I think fundamentally it's worth emphasizing that it's the people who obviously get in contact and feedback are the people who actually are the most engaged often, and they're the ones who want to see the organization succeed. So it's worth you know, having these thoughts in place first. And please don't panic. Please do not panic when that happens. So think about some team training when it comes to just to make people feel comfortable and empowered dealing with difficult conversations. And obviously it's really important that you are communicating with supporters. Again, you know, try and keep them close to the projects that they've come on board to support. There's obviously a balance, inform without overloading, but time and time again, we see that there's been like a phase, a swathe of regular giving recruitment 6 years ago, 10 years ago, where regular givers have been brought on board and then they've been left. They're just not touched. They're left alone. And then, you know, regular giving comes back on the agenda and it's like, right, what are we going to do with them? Well, think about the fact please don't go out with the next communication being an ask for money. If you have, you know, left them alone for a long period of time, it would be extremely alienating and counterintuitive. So again, just think of these things when it comes to your own program, bear that in mind. And when it comes to stewardship, map out your touch points, think about that holistic view. You know, what are the different stages? What are you doing currently? How can you uplift that? Think about that entire regular giving experience, and then think about where you want to get to. What are the opportunities to enhance the relationship? It does not have to be, it's not brain surgery. You know, you can do some really simple, lovely, effective things where you're actually engaging with people. Other consideration as well is just to sort of throw into the mix is satisfaction rates. They go hand in hand with effective committed giving programs. So if you're not thinking about satisfaction rates and monitoring that as one of your KPIs, it's worth just popping in there, maybe enhancing a newsletter that's going out with some kind of survey or questionnaire, but start thinking about that and looking at behaviors over time, because regular giving is long-term, 100%. And the last thing, Amy mentioned the word homework. My favorite thing, not really not, but something for you guys to go away and think about, just a little challenge for you is take a look at your excuse me, your regular giving confirmation letters. What do they look like? What is the quality of them? Can you, are you 100% confident that what's going out for that really key initial communication, that it's, it cuts the mustard? Even really simple things like better personalization, grammar. I know that sounds very homeworky, but just those little things that can really enhance, and obviously linking back to the proposition where people have come on board to support, just makes things, yeah. But yeah, tiny little bit of homework. Even if you don't do anything else, go away and look at those. And yeah, I'm going to stop talking.
All right. So you're going to take one slide away. Here's all the stuff that we've talked about today. Now you don't have to scramble to get this. As I said, this webinar is going to be up on our website, so you obviously can go and take a look at this again. But I won't go through all of these things again, but this is kind of how we've categorized each piece of this puzzle. We're a fundraising agency. We are able and willing to help you with any of this stuff. We're also able and willing just to have a chat with you about it. If it's something that will help you out, we're more than happy to do that. So please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that could be done, given the resources and time. I mean, if everybody here is a super fundraiser and probably is quite stretched, but maybe taking stock first and then seeing what realistically you think you can accomplish, within the next year, or with your existing regular givers, or maybe going out for the first time with an ask. All of that stuff is quite exciting and something that you can hopefully implement. And again, if you need help implementing it, we are always here too. Right. So if you want to set up a call with us, that's a Calendly link, go for it. You want to follow us on LinkedIn, that's where we send stuff about webinars and just other stuff. We show case studies and things that might be useful to you. Please do follow that. But now I think we have some time for questions. I think we've got some. Jude, perhaps?
We do. Sorry, I was just getting my view so that I can look at the questions as well. I'm just going to shift people around so I can see what I'm doing.
Oh, and just to say too, if we don't answer your question here, please do ask it via email or however, and we will get to it when we can, for sure.
Okay.
I will while you're looking, Jude, I will just say about there was quite a few questions about response rate. So response rate on cold, very low, very, very low. Go on, Ellie.
I'm going to jump in on this. For me, response rates always relate to channel, so it's completely channel dependent. So I think somebody had asked about, response rate by different channels, but also within those channels, you have different activity as well. So for example, with phone, you will have upgrade, react, and conversion. And for each of those, you're going to have a different response rate. So off the top of my head, I know that obviously your upgrade is going to be your highest performing. And I'm going to sort of guesstimate. I think whenever I've done some of the planning work, the operational planning work, it's been maybe between 30 and 40%. Again, all of this depends on your data as well and your phone data. So there's so many interdependencies that it's going to make something effective. So it's knowing what KPIs to put in your plan in place to then base everything back on. But I would say your next thing is going to be reactivation. So again, I don't know, conservative estimate would be maybe 18%, and then conversion, again, maybe slightly lower than that again. But you have to be mindful that it all depends on your channel, your data quality, and obviously the volumes that you're dealing with. If you're going to go out there and do a mass conversion campaign with a huge slate of data, your response rates are going to diminish. So there's so many other factors, but yeah, those would be the sort of initial thoughts around phone anyway. And I think Amy's already touched on the direct mail.
Fab. Okay, I'm going to go through the list of questions. So the first question we had was from Diana, asking about proposition. Can you give us an example of what you see as a great proposition for regular giving? So Diana, hopefully the slides that I went through will go some way to answering that question. But what we would always say is we would always make it very specific to your organization, to your people, to the people that you support and take care of. And as I've said, we would go through that detailed process of talking to as many people as we possibly can. What do we need? What will it mean if we actually get this need met? And then why is that important? So I would say out of that sort of 3-step formula, the why is this important question is probably the one that's going to bring you to the most creative and meaningful and compelling proposition that you can. But again, it's going to be very specific to your organization. Wouldn't necessarily recommend a sort of a blanket proposition across the board for regular giving. Again, we want to cut through that noise. We want to speak directly to people's hearts. And as I've said, shift them out of the rational side of their brain, where we tend to reside a lot of the time, into the empathetic side of our brain. And that's going to be very dependent on getting the messaging absolutely spot on for your organization. So hopefully that helps. Moya asked, what do you mean by cash? Amy, I think you answered that. Yeah, so it's a one-off cash ask as opposed to regular giving. Yes, we will give you.
Sorry, hi. Oh gosh,
Oh,
it's
Moya,
Moya.
hello.
Hi, sorry, but not physical cash. It doesn't matter whether it's
No.
electronic or. Sorry, I
Oh,
was just a bit dim.
yeah, sorry, if you see what you mean. We call it cash. I don't know who else calls it what, but yeah, essentially what we mean is just a money donation as opposed to a direct debit or a standing order. Does that make sense?
So like a one-off cash donation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Not physical cash. Yes, correct. Sorry, we should have been clear about that.
That is a question I also asked when I first started working in charity. Will we get the slides afterwards? Yes, we will give the slides afterwards. They will be available to you.
Yeah, I think if you ask for them, obviously it's quite a chunky presentation. So if you email us and ask for them, that's no problem.
Yeah, that's a good idea. It's quite a few megabits. How have your clients found face-to-face in the past couple of years? Are they seeing a worthwhile ROI? I will hand over to either Ellie, Amy, or Chelsea on that one, or anybody else who's been doing face-to-face.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, Jude? You kind of cut out there for me.
Oh, sorry. So how have clients found face-to-face in the past couple of years? Are they seeing a worthwhile ROI?
So I think I know who asked that question. Is that Ruth Cook? From what I understand, there has been a big uplift in face-to-face. I certainly, and if we're talking as well about a local market, thinking about Northern Ireland, Ruth, I understand that it's performing really well for a couple of our clients. So I hope that reassures you. I think for me, there's always going to be that sort of tension between whether people do venue or door to door. I think with door to door, you can get the volume quicker than you can with venue. Venue can be that little bit more expensive, but I think the quality in terms of recruit is much more significant. And when you're thinking about all the KPIs, and again, I'm a bore, but it is all about the KPIs. So when you're looking at attrition rates and thinking about face-to-face, venue tends to be that bit better, certainly in terms of retaining and the longer term return. That makes sense. But again, if yeah, I got it. Thanks. If we can have a conversation about that another time, perhaps.
I'm gonna say, I think you probably mentioned this, Ellie, but like the cost per recruit is obviously quite high, so it is.
It is. It's. I mean, that's the difficulty with all of these things. I would say when it comes to your regular giving plan is to think of every single. There's so many KPIs that can be applied, but you have to look at them holistically, and it has to be. So when I'm producing something for a client, it'll be looking at, year 1 return, year 3, and year 5 quite often. So that tends to be the output of any audit is an ops plan. And those are the sort of the metrics we're looking at. And with each of those, you're applying a different attrition rate. Obviously first year tends to be higher. But again, thinking about things like average gifts, it's totally different with a face-to-face ask. You can ask for that higher value, you can't do that if you're doing a DRTV advert. That's why we see the £2, £3 ask level with DRTV. It's completely different. Regular giving is so much more successful when you've got that sort of really strong relationship. And that's why places do invest so much in the face-to-face side of things. I think the bit that's happened traditionally is that organizations have fallen down when it comes to looking after those people that they've brought on board. And it's wrong, that they've spent, the cost per recruit's been so high, they've got them through the door. It's almost like that horrible, it's like a funnel, get them in, and they're just not looking after them and not listening to them and not understanding their motivations, their areas of interest, their passions, what, you know, why they've been connected. They're not sending effective communications. They stick them in a pile and forget about them. So I think, you know, that sometimes it's worth making that investment, but I would say only if you're going to look after them. You know, don't be doing this if, you know, you haven't got your other ducks in a row. And that's the thing with regular giving. It's just not like cash. You know, it's almost more like legacy giving, I would say, in terms of understanding that this is really everybody's responsibility in the organization. So yeah, here ends my preaching on regular giving. Sorry.
Awesome. We have a question from David. David, what sort of response rates are you seeing on a regular giving direct mail ask? Amy.
It's a very good question. I want to say between 1% and 2%. I mean, Dave, is it David? I wonder which David it is. If it's David from Keach, then I think, again, this goes back to the question of, what kind of charity are you? Are you regional? Are you national? Like how devoted and how many people are you able to go out to? So when we talk about hospices, for example, we have a rough usual mailing file of 6,000 to 10,000. Like we feel pretty comfortable. We can probably say that the response rate is going to be around 1% to 2%. It is low. I mean, we don't expect to sort of like burn the barn doors down with it. It's like it is. I don't even know where I came up with that metaphor, but so I think, again, setting your expectations low and then exceeding them is probably the best way to go about this. If you are sort of a regionally based charity, you have good brand recognition, you know, you have good committed givers, and you know, they respond well to that upgrade ask as well. You know, obviously that factors into the response rate, but we would expect that it's a substantially lower response rate than if you were to go out, I don't know, with an equipment appeal or just some sort of other cash ask, your spring appeal, your Christmas appeal, you know, whatever it happens to be. You'll probably see more of a response to that, because what we're asking people to do is a much more significant commitment to your charity. And so just making sure that you have the right people within that mail file is going to push your response rate up. But equally, it's a chance for you to speculate on some of the, you know, less engaged people if you haven't communicated this kind of thing to them before.
And I think it's worth thinking about it as only one KPI. So put it into your plan and then look at the other metrics that need to go along with it. Your return on investment for year 1, year 2, year 3, whatever that is, because that's the whole point with regular giving is, yes, your response rates are going to be lower. However, the long-term, you know, sustainable income is going to be so much higher. So that's why your plan has to take all those KPIs into account. And I'm very happy to talk to anybody about, you know, an operational plan and how you can apply those metrics to show the actual, you know, long-term return on investment and what that looks like for your organization. And that's why I think, yeah, not looking at one metric alone is
it's a bit like what you said about legacy.
It's not enough. You have to look at everything, average gifts and attrition rates and long-term.
Yeah, this is an investment effectively. And I think we've heard a lot of charities who've had conversations, you know, perhaps with their boards or their trustees who don't really understand the mechanism of regular giving, and that it's not just a big like cash grab, and that it's an investment in the future in bringing people along on your charity's journey, making sure that they feel loved and supported, but there's a reciprocal sort of relationship there. And again, they feed into your legacy prospects. So making sure that everybody on board who's making the decisions around regular giving gets what it actually is really crucial in selling that lower response rate.
It's a program. It has to be a program. It's never, regular giving will never survive based on an appeal or a couple of appeals. This is a proper, robust program with multiple channels and multiple activities, and integrating the message across the organization and maximizing every touch point your supporter has. That's how it works, definitely.
I'm conscious of the time, guys, so anybody who needs to jump off, please do. And if we haven't got to your question, just pop us an email and we can get back to you. So we have a question from Diana, which kind of follows on from the last question. do we have sector benchmarks for regular giving conversion from cash givers that we can share, e.g. DM, TM, digital channels, including social and email? That's probably something we'd have to dig into. Would it be? Ellie, Amy?
I'm very happy. We can link in separately. I think if I'm very happy to speak to that individual separately.
Okay.
I think ultimately, yes, all that would be great, but I don't see that. I don't know that there's anyone actually compiling those sector statistics.
There's
either.
not, but I think we can definitely give some guidance around certain, again, looking at sort of some of the ops plans we've worked on. We can give some guidance around individual channels. There's nothing sort of sector wide that sort of says definitively this is, what you're going to get. Going back to you need to look at the data. You need to look at, what phone data you have, what emails, all of that feeds into it. But yeah, excellent, Diana. I will. Yeah, we'll link up.
A question from Ruth. How important do you think it is to have an identity for regular givers, a product name, so to speak? From a creative perspective, Ruth, I would say your messaging and really speaking to what's at the heart of your ask is probably more important than having a specific identity. If you could marry the two together, even better. But I would certainly, rather than looking for a product name as the start of the process, I would be getting to the heart of it. Why is it important? Why is it going to matter? What change is it going to facilitate? How is your regular gift or donation going to support all of that? And then from that, a product name might emerge. So I would say it's a two-step process, but don't get too caught up on having to have a product name.
I would also just add to that what also seems to happen within a lot of charities is you obviously have a lot of people who leave, and let's say they've set up this special fancy bird donor group, right? One fundraiser does that with their regular givers. That's what they're called. That's all the communication that they get. And then that fundraiser leaves and goes somewhere else. So then you're sort of stuck with a group of people that maybe don't fit a particular identity for the next fundraiser coming in, or that fundraiser then feels compelled to change that name or change that group. So it's really important that, if there is going to be some sort of identity attached to it, that the whole charity kind of feeds into it and is embraced by that whole charity, and maybe not so specific that, when it comes to you looking at your data, you're like, who's this group of people and why are they called this in the source codes or whatever it happens to be, so that anybody, moving on, I guess we want to make sure that they feel like they're part of the whole family, not like one specific group or family.
Cool. So we have a question from Donna. Do you have a typical average percentage response rate on a targeted postcode area, door-to-door drop?
No, but again, I think the thing to think about with cold and a targeted area is that even if it's like your best area ever and you know that you have loads of supporters there, asking cold people, so people that aren't familiar with you, to give a regular gift is a big ask. So I would set those expectations extra low. And again, we are not talking above 1% here. Like we're talking even maybe 0.5%, if even. And I think it depends on what kind of charity you are. It depends on how engaged you are with that particular area. But still, we would always probably maximize giving from those warm donors first, people who know and love you already, than people who are like, oh yeah, that's that charity that does that thing over there. Like, I think really just thinking about your audience and how you're going to spend your money is super important in this case.
Cheers, Amy. And so our last question comes from Rosalind. This is one for you, Ellie. Can you recommend a face-to-face agency working in Northern Ireland, venue only? So again, that might be a conversation, a one-to-one maybe, Ellie? Ellie's having her lunch.
Yep. I'm sorry. Yes, Rosalind, I'll give you a wee shout, sure.
Perfect. I don't see any more questions. Naomi, are we through all the questions?
If we haven't answered your question satisfactorily, then please do drop us a line. You've got an email there to go to. But just to say a huge thanks to Jude, Chelsea and Ellie for everything, all their expertise in bringing that today, talking about all things regular giving. And thanks to all of you for giving up potentially your lunch hours to be with us. We really appreciate it. As I say, we'll send around the link to this webinar on our website once we've been able to upload it. Any questions, any chats you want to have, just drop us a line. Have I missed anything?
I think that's it.
No. Thank you so much. Lovely to see some of you and hear some of you. And we'll catch you at our Christmas webinar, or sorry, winter webinar.
Mm.
We'll see you later.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Take care, folks.
Thank you.